review your unit that you've been doing lately. Surprising it's happening already, huh? So we're going to look at lines and angles and how we see them in shapes, as well as how to recognize them in our world around us. Everything we see is in some form of a shape, and everything is made up of lines and different angles. So it's good that you recognize these. All right, so we're going to take the first one together, and then some of these you're going to do on your own. So I sure hope you have a scratch piece of paper handy and a pencil, so then that way you are ready and can start some of these on your own, and then we'll go back and check them. I want you fully prepared for your assessment tomorrow. Okay, so the first one here. Okay, so we're going to look at this figure. With the number 1 on it. So if you want to write number 1, and then maybe at the top you can write these, because we're going to do this with all of these next 4 shapes. So the first one we're going to look at is set of parallel lines, then sets of perpendicular lines. And when I'm talking about sets, one set is 2 lines, because you can't have parallel lines if you have 1 line. That's impossible. Same thing with perpendicular. 2 lines. You can't have perpendicular lines with only 1 line. That would be weird. So when I'm talking about a set, it's like shoes. You either have 2 shoes or you have 1, but then you're barefoot. So you have to have 2 to go together. Then we have acute angles, right angles, and obtuse angles. Now, if you need to, on the top of your paper, write those 5 things and kind of draw long lines down the length of your paper, that's fine. Go ahead and pause this right now and do so. If you feel good about where you're at, that's fine too, but I do want you to understand which one is which, okay? So pause this if you want to add those to the top of your paper, because this is the same thing we'll do on 4 different shapes. Okay, so looking at this first one, we have what kind of shape? Easy peasy, it's a square. Okay, now we need to look at what are parallel lines. Now, parallel lines, I think of like, stick them up. Your hands go straight up in the air. They're never going to crisscross because they're straight up in the air. Or like, touchdown, right? So those are parallel lines. When we look at this square, though, I see that this line and this line are parallel to each other. They're going to keep going forever this direction and never cross. I also see this side and this side are parallel, and that's our up and down, like our touchdown ones. So when we look at that, I did them in different colors for a reason. 2 are purple, so that would be 1 set. 2 are red, so that would be another set. So when I look at this as our answer here, we should have how many sets of parallel lines? Well, we should have 2 of them, right? Bam. Okay. Now let's move on to perpendicular, and I'm going to erase what I just drew over here on the square so I don't confuse you. Okay, when we're looking at perpendicular, that means they intersect right at 90 degrees. So it would be like sticking one arm straight up, one arm straight out. They are perfectly right, straight one way or the other, right? So where do you make perpendicular lines? So I see that this side and this side together make a perpendicular spot right here at 90 degrees. So that would be 1. I see this one and this one making another one. Even though I have 2 different colors on that bottom line, you need them to make up that corner, and that's what's going to show your perpendicular. Okay, and then I have this line with this line makes another perpendicular line intersecting, and go to this one. Then I have this line and this line that make another perpendicular spot. So because of that, how many colors did I use? And this is nice with colors that you can show that. So there are 4 colors. That means there are 4 different sets of perpendicular lines. And I'm just going to write it in this time. Okay? Because there are 4 corners and they are all perfectly the same way. And I'm not going to give away another answer, but I think you're getting to what I'm talking about here. Okay. Now, we're going to move on to angles. The first one in the chart is so they're so cute. They're less than I don't know why that ball is bouncing around. There we go. Disappear. It's possessed. Okay, so acute angles. What do we have here that would be acute? I hope you're shaking your head going, none. There are no acute angles in a perfect square. So on that box, we do need to say 0. Don't just leave it blank, otherwise your teacher's going to go, do they know it or do they not know it? 0 is a number, so put it in there. Okay, right angles. Do we see any right angles? Now, kind of gave this away. If you have perpendicular lines that intersect perfectly, you also make a right angle in the corner where they intersect. So when we did that before, I was making those boxes on purpose. And sorry, they're not exactly perfect. But each one of those makes a perfect right angle. So how many did we draw? 4. Bam. Okay. How about acute angles? Well, if we used up all the angles and all the angles were already right, did we mess up there and one of them is obtuse? If you don't know, and I know this is hard to see, sticky notes are the very best thing to check for angles. But if you don't have a sticky note, just the corner of a paper, if you line the corner of a paper up to, sorry, I'm giving you all the answers. If you line a corner of the paper up to your corner and check, do you see both lines appear? If you do, and they're lined up right with the paper, then you know it's a right angle. If one of them is hidden, then that means it's acute. If one of them is way off away from your paper, that means it's obtuse. So it's just kind of a good check. So in this case, all of them are right. So there are 0 obtuse angles. Okay? So I'm going to get rid of this shade. You have 3 other shapes here. Oh. And my thing does not want to move. I want you to look at these 3 other shapes. And on your paper, I want you to fill in the chart for each one. Okay? Sets of parallel lines, perpendicular lines, acute angles, right angles, and obtuse angles. After you fill in your chart, I'm going to go over this again. But because of the sake of the time for me to record, you need to pause this. If you're not pausing this and trying to work on your own and you're just waiting and watching me do it, well, okay, I already know what I'm doing. At least I hope so. But I want you to know. And the best way for you to know is if you try these before you get to your test. Okay, so pause this right now. Oh, and you know what? I might, it's not quite fitting on there. Might drag down a shape here so you could see this better, as that arrow kind of disappeared, didn't it? So let me move this shape down so you can see all of it. And then I want you to try. There we go. Okay, so go ahead and try those. So pause this right now. And I think you probably need my picture moved too. My goodness, everything's all in the way, isn't it? There, so much better. Go ahead and fill those in, and then we're going to go over this. So pause this right now. Okay, boys and girls, you should have paused this, so now it's time for us to go through it, okay? So we're going to look first at number 2, the sets of parallel lines. Remember, they go on forever in the same direction and don't ever intersect. If I were to look at this, that one is not parallel to either one of those because those 2 are already intersecting right there. This line is not parallel to either one of those 2 because they intersect. And if I were to do that with every single one, we're going to run into the fact that there are absolutely no parallel lines. Okay? Now, sets of perpendicular lines. Now, I know a lot of people want to look at this and go, well, there's no parallel, so then that means they all have to be perpendicular. But are they? Remember, perpendicular lines must make a perfect 90-degree angle where they intersect. And in this case, do any of those angles make 90-degree angles? And I hope you are using the corner of your paper to check. Were you lining it up? I notice when I do it, there's a line that sticks out on each one. I can line one up and the other one sticks out. So that tells me that none of these are exactly right angles. And this is where, if you know the trick with lines and angles, if you know there are no perpendicular lines, there are no right angles. They go hand in hand, okay? So if you have one, then you must have the other. If you don't have one, then you don't have the other. Okay, so now let's look for acute angles, meaning they're kind of small. They're less than a right angle. If I look at all of these angles, were you able to find an acute angle? And my guess is you said no. Well, weird. How can the first 4 boxes be 0, but yet I have lines and yet I have angles? Well, then I hope you realized that these are all obtuse angles. So you have to count how many you have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 5 obtuse angles. So we've now figured out the angles, but what about the lines? What are these lines all called then if they are not parallel and they are not perpendicular? You're right. You have intersecting lines. All of these lines that meet are intersecting. So if we were to look at that, because there are 5 angles, that means there are 5 pairs of intersecting lines. Now, we didn't put this on your chart for a reason, because I wanted to see if you could understand what type of lines there are and what type of angles they are. That will help you to determine them. Okay? All right, now our triangle over here for number 3. By the way, what did you come up with the shape was for number 2? Were you thinking about that? If it's a 5-sided shape, has 5 angles, it's called a pentagon. Okay, so pentagon. Some of the questions might ask you for names of shapes too, but you should know them already too. Okay, so number 3 at this triangle here. Sets of parallel lines. Well, if I look at this side, is this side parallel to anything? No, just an angle. How about this side? Is this side parallel to anything, meaning go straight across from it? No, just another angle. How about this side? No, just another angle. So do we have any sets of parallel lines? No, siree, we do not. So must put a 0 in there. Okay? Now perpendicular, anything that makes a perfect right angle. Well, if I were to stick my paper up there, this angle, does that make a perfect box in the corner? How about this angle? Or this angle? Do they make perfect squares in the corner? They don't, do they? So there are 0 perpendicular lines. So what are the lines listed on here? Sorry, my dog's going to bark a little bit. Hunter, no. So when we look at this, these are all intersecting lines again. Okay? All right, now, what kind of angles are there? So we know we have 3 angles. We have 3 corners. What kind of angle are those? Well, we said they are not right. Remember when we said if there's no perpendicular lines, there are also no right angles, right? And look, it's true on that one as well. So, do we have any acute angles or obtuse angles? Well, if we look at these, they're pretty small. All 3 of them are small, aren't they? And we know they're not right. And If they're not right, are they larger than a right? And they're not. So